The case of 17-year-old Zion Foster began with a single text message. OMW, on my way home. It was the last thing her boyfriend would ever receive from her. Zion had gone out that night with someone her mother trusted, someone the family considered safe. Her favorite cousin, a man who later claimed he had not seen her in years. But investigators would eventually uncover a trail of lies, deleted evidence, disturbing searches, and one horrifying confession. And even after a murder conviction, Zion Foster's body has never been found. Hi everyone, welcome back to Whispers of Crime. Tonight's case is one of manipulation, betrayal, and a family torn apart by lies. It's the story of a teenage girl who vanished after leaving home late one night, and the cousin who kept changing his story every time police got closer to the truth. This is the case of Zion Foster. January 5th, 2022. Before sunrise, Sierra Milton realized something was wrong. Her 17-year-old daughter, Zion Foster, had not returned home. At first, that might not sound unusual. Zion was a teenager, and like many teenagers, she had pushed boundaries before. She had argued with her mother. She had run away in the past. Police would later use that history to dismiss the seriousness of her disappearance. But Sierra knew this time was different. Zion was the oldest of 6 children. She was a senior in high school, working part-time at Detroit Wing Company, trying to balance school, relationships, work, and growing independence. She had dreams, plans, and according to her boyfriend, she was supposed to be home hours ago. The night before, Zion had returned from work and asked her mother if she could go out. She explained exactly where she was going. She said she was spending time with her favorite cousin, Jalen Brazier. Sierra trusted him. She had seen Zion leave with him before. So just before 11 p.m., Sierra watched her daughter walk out the door. She had no idea it would be the last time she would ever see her alive. Hours later, Zion's boyfriend, Vertez Gonzalez, became worried. He had been texting her throughout the night, but suddenly the messages stopped going through. Calls went straight to voicemail. The last text he received from Zion came at 12:59 a.m. OMW, on my way. But she never made it home. As panic set in, Vertez contacted Sierra. Together, they started trying to figure out where Zion had gone. That's when things became strange. Sierra reached out to Jalen Brazier, expecting him to help find her daughter. Instead, he shocked her. Jalen claimed Zion had not been with him at all. In fact, he told Sierra he had not seen or spoken to Zion in years. Years. The statement made no sense. Sierra knew that wasn't true. Jalen had been around the family. He had picked Zion up before. Sierra herself had seen him in her driveway. But Jalen insisted Zion was lying about spending time with him. He even suggested another possibility. Maybe Zion had used him as a cover story while secretly meeting someone else nearby. It sounded convincing enough at first, especially because Zion's location data showed her near Jalen's neighborhood, not necessarily inside his house. But Vertez had something important: a screenshot. Like many young couples, Zion and Vertez shared their locations with each other. And sometime around 11:24 p.m., Vertez noticed Zion's location sitting directly across from Jalen's house. He saved the screenshot. That screenshot would become one of the first cracks in Jalen's story. Still, police were slow to act. When Sierra reported Zion missing, officers immediately viewed the case as another runaway situation. To them, Zion was just a rebellious teenager. But to her mother, this was different. Sierra begged police to take it seriously. Instead, she felt dismissed. So the family began searching on their own. They organized rallies, passed out flyers, spoke to local media. Friends and relatives searched neighborhoods, desperately hoping someone had seen Zion. Meanwhile, police finally decided to question Jalen. At the time, Jalen Brazier was 23 years old. He had 2 children, a long-term girlfriend named Katrina, and outwardly appeared to be a regular young father trying to build a stable life. When officers arrived at his house, Jalen seemed calm, relaxed. He welcomed them inside. He repeated the same story. He had not seen Zion. He barely spoke to her anymore. And according to him, Zion's mother and boyfriend were creating unnecessary drama because Zion had a history of running away. He even showed officers footage from his Ring camera system, claiming there was no sign Zion had ever been there that night. Police searched the house. Nothing suspicious was immediately discovered. But Sierra wasn't convinced. She believed Jalen was lying from the beginning. And soon, technology would prove she was right. Investigators began checking nearby surveillance footage from neighboring homes. One camera across the street captured something critical. At around 11:15 p.m., a white sedan pulled into Jalen's driveway. 2 people stepped out. 1 male, 1 female, and both walked directly into the house. Police already knew Katrina was at work that night, working an overnight manufacturing shift. The woman entering the house could not have been her. Cell phone data later confirmed what investigators suspected. The woman entering Jalen's house was Zion Foster. And the footage revealed something even more disturbing. The camera never captured her leaving. Hours later, at around 1:41 a.m., the same surveillance camera showed Jalen moving his vehicle strangely in the driveway. He backed the car in so the trunk faced the backyard. Then, he drove away. He returned less than 10 minutes later. Now, investigators knew 2 things for certain. Jalen lied about seeing Zion, and Zion was last seen alive entering his house. Search warrants were immediately executed again. This time, investigators focused heavily on Jalen's car. Initially, they found no obvious signs of violence. But then cadaver dogs were brought in. The dogs alerted strongly to the trunk. At that point, the investigation shifted completely. Jalen was no longer just a cousin who lied. He was now the prime suspect. On January the 19th, detectives brought Jalen in for questioning again. This time, his story changed dramatically. Suddenly, he admitted Zion had been at his house all along. According to Jalen, he picked Zion up from her home and brought her over to hang out. They smoked marijuana together, watched TV, talked about life. Then, he claimed, Zion suddenly became sleepy and passed out on the couch. At first, he thought she was resting. But after several minutes, he tried waking her up. She wouldn't respond. Jalen claimed her breathing became faint, then non-existent. According to him, Zion simply died, right there on his couch. Detectives immediately questioned the story. A healthy 17-year-old girl does not just suddenly die without explanation. But what came next horrified everyone. Instead of calling 911, instead of contacting her mother, instead of trying to save her, Jalen admitted he panicked. He placed Zion's body into the trunk of his car, then drove to a dumpster in Highland Park and threw her away, like trash. Even detectives seemed stunned listening to him explain it. He described dumping her body casually, almost mechanically, as if he were talking about garbage disposal instead of a human being. Investigators asked him directly, "How did you know she was dead?" Jalen insisted she wasn't breathing and he couldn't feel a heartbeat. But his explanations were vague, inconsistent, and detectives noticed something else. His emotions didn't seem to match the situation. There was fear, but not grief. Not panic over losing someone he supposedly loved, just fear for himself. Jalen agreed to take detectives to the dumpsters where he claimed he left Zion's body. By then, weeks had passed. There was nothing there. Still, police tracked garbage collection routes and launched a massive landfill search operation. Volunteers and investigators spent months digging through mountains of trash, hoping to recover Zion's remains. It became one of the most emotionally devastating parts of the case. A teenage girl reduced to a search through garbage. While that search continued, investigators uncovered more troubling evidence. They learned Jalen had factory reset his phone just 2 days after Zion disappeared. He claimed he had nothing to hide. But wiping a phone during a missing person investigation raised serious suspicion. And despite the reset, detectives still recovered important digital evidence from cloud backups. Meanwhile, Jalen continued changing his story. During another interview, he suddenly introduced a new explanation: LSD. Now he claimed they had taken acid that night, and perhaps the drugs caused Zion's death. Detectives pressed him harder. Were you high? Did something happen while under the influence? Did you hurt her? But Jalen never confessed to murder. He just kept shifting details, each version sounding different from the last. And prosecutors believed there was a reason for that. Because Jalen wasn't trying to explain an accident. He was trying to explain away a murder. Even with all the suspicion, prosecutors initially lacked enough evidence for homicide charges. Without a body, the case became harder. So Jalen was only charged with lying to police. At sentencing, he stood before the judge and insisted Zion's death was an accident. He claimed fear caused him to dump her body. Fear of police. Fear of drugs being discovered. Fear of ruining his life. But many people listening struggled to believe him. Because no normal reaction to a medical emergency is secretly throwing someone into a dumpster. Especially not someone you claim to love. Jalen was sentenced to nearly 2 years in prison for lying to investigators. But even while incarcerated, investigators kept watching him closely. His jail phone calls became extremely revealing. Again and again, Jalen asked family members whether there had been any major developments. Detectives believed he was referring to the landfill search, and his reactions were strange. Instead of hoping Zion would be found, Jalen seemed relieved whenever searches failed. That behavior deeply bothered investigators. Because if Zion truly died accidentally, finding her body could have supported his version of events. Instead, he seemed desperate for her never to be found. Then, investigators uncovered something far more disturbing. Recovered search history showed Jalen had searched graphic pornography involving cousins and step-cousins before Zion's disappearance. Prosecutors believed this exposed a hidden obsession. And when they examined old phones belonging to Zion, they discovered thousands of text messages between her and Jalen. The messages painted a disturbing picture. Jalen routinely encouraged Zion to visit him when his girlfriend was away. He complimented her appearance excessively. He discussed people mistaking them for a couple. At times, the conversations crossed deeply inappropriate boundaries. Prosecutors argued Jalen had been grooming Zion for years, slowly manipulating the relationship into something twisted. Then came another key detail. On the night Zion disappeared, Katrina, Jalen's pregnant girlfriend, was feeling sick at work. She repeatedly texted him asking to come home. Around 1:25 a.m., she complained about stomach pain and nausea. But Jaylen kept encouraging her to stay at work. Hours later, when he finally picked her up, she noticed a deep scratch across his collarbone. Jaylen blamed the family cat, but Katrina found that explanation strange. The cat had never scratched him like that before. Prosecutors believed the scratch may have happened during a violent struggle inside the house. By 2024, after nearly 2 years of investigation, prosecutors finally secured murder charges against Jaylen Brazier. The trial began. And even without Zion's body, prosecutors believed the digital evidence, surveillance footage, deleted phone data, suspicious searches, and constant lies formed a powerful case. The defense tried introducing another possibility: seizures. Zion's boyfriend testified that she once mentioned having seizures and medication. But Zion's mother strongly denied it. Medical records reviewed in court showed no evidence supporting a seizure disorder. Experts testified that Jaylen's description of Zion quietly fading away did not match medical reality. An asthma attack, seizure, or overdose would likely involve visible distress, not someone silently dying on a couch while another person calmly poured a drink. Prosecutors focused heavily on behavior, because behavior tells stories, and Jaylen's behavior after Zion disappeared was impossible to ignore. He lied repeatedly, deleted evidence, dumped her body, reset his phone, searched garbage truck compactors online, looked up whether police could track phone history, and throughout the investigation, he seemed more concerned about getting caught than about Zion herself. The prosecution believed there was only one reasonable explanation: Jaylen murdered Zion. After 2 weeks of testimony, the case went to the jury. It took them only 30 minutes. 30 minutes to find Jaylen Brazier guilty. At sentencing, Jaylen still maintained his innocence. He admitted dumping Zion's body, but denied killing her. The judge wasn't convinced. He condemned Jaylen for his lies, manipulation, lack of accountability, and cruelty towards Zion's family, especially her mother. A mother who spent years begging for answers while never even getting the chance to bury her daughter. Jaylen Brazier was sentenced to 30 to 90 years in prison for murder, plus additional years for tampering with evidence. But even with the conviction, one heartbreaking reality remains. Zion Foster has never been found. Somewhere, her remains are still missing. And for her family, that pain never truly ends, because justice without closure still leaves an open wound. A mother still waiting, a family still grieving, and a teenage girl whose final moments may never fully be known. What makes this case especially chilling is how ordinary it looked at first. A cousin, a trusted family connection, someone welcomed into their lives. And yet investigators believe that behind closed doors, Jaylen had been hiding disturbing intentions for years. In the end, it wasn't one piece of evidence that convicted him. It was the lies, the changing stories, the deleted data, the searches, the surveillance footage, and the undeniable fact that Zion entered his house alive, but never came back out. Thanks for watching today's episode of Whispers of Crime. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another case. And as always, be careful who you trust.